Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor with Star Local Media, and I'm being joined by Justin Thomas, sports editor for our Denton County papers. And Justin, let's catch up with an old friend.
What's up?
So, a face from Star Local Media's past, a face from local high school sports journalism's past.
Oh, yes.
You can, nowadays, you can hear him Monday through Friday, 7 to 11 p.m. on 105.3 The Fan. He is one half of the K&C Masterpiece, Kevin Hageland. Welcome back, buddy.
Man, I'm glad to be here. I worked here for 7.5 years, and it's kind of a trip being back in these offices, I'm not going to lie.
So we've established this is the first time that you've been back here since...
Outside of maybe a couple months afterwards. Like, I think I came back like a couple months afterwards, but other than that, it's been almost 5 years. So
any flashbacks, any nostalgia?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you the cleaned up version, but I pulled into the parking lot, saw a lot of the same cars, saw the same basic setup, and I said, things don't change. So,
I do think that at least, like I said, it's been 5 years. 5 years it's been a minute. So maybe some backstory is required just to add some context to who you are, and why do we have just a regional sports talk show host on a high school sports podcast?
That is a good question.
So Kevin used to be the sports editor here at Star Local Media. He worked here from 06
to 13,
and within that span, he said he ran the sports department here, helped very much kind of lay the groundwork for our sports coverage, set the culture for our department as a whole, and nowadays I've hired me.
That's true. That's a good. Why isn't that the lead? Why isn't that the first thing that we say? That's why I'm here. Payback.
So in the with what Kevin and his co-host Corey Majors do nowadays on The Fan, it's kind of poetic in a sense, because I'm not sure how many of your listeners are privy to this, but the K&C Masterpiece actually had its beginnings within the walls of this newsroom.
No, absolutely. Corey and I met here at Star Local Media. Like, I didn't know him outside of the newspaper, so if it weren't for this place, there's no K&C Masterpiece. And so, obviously, I'm sure things are different now in your company and your leadership, very forward-thinking. But at the time, and Justin can attest to this, there were definitely some times where we had some struggles and there was some frustration, and Corey and I, and this is before Justin and I worked in the same office, or hey, could have been our show, Justin. Yeah. So Corey and I were really frustrated with the lack of forward thinking that some of the management had, and so we decided that we were just going to start doing kind of our own thing and trying to up the website. And so we just started doing a series of video blogs, kind of like a precursor to our show, hopefully a precursor to this and all that. And so we called it the K&C Masterpiece because I'm K, he's C, and we like to eat. So barbecue sauce, hey. So that's what we decided to do. And I have to give a shout out to Kenny Green, another Star Local Media representative.
Kenny
that's a name from Flash from the past.
He just got married. Congratulations, Kenny. He would be our cameraman, and he would set it up. I know now. Oh, we don't even need a cameraman, but
a tripod.
I know. Some things do change.
Technology.
Yeah, I know, right?
Forward thinking.
At the time, we needed him to help us out, and so we would actually record kind of instant reaction things after games. And so you guys obviously are well aware and still in the Tuesday night, Friday night cycle, and so Tuesday night maybe closer to midnight, Friday night maybe closer to 2 or 3 in the morning, we would record these videos. And when you're recording the videos at 3 in the morning, you're like, well, no one's gonna watch this. And keep in mind, it was still 08. It's not now where everybody watches everything all the time. And so all of a sudden, you would go on campus to interview coaches or players, and people were like, hey, I saw your video about this and that. And I was like, you did? Cool. And so you realize pretty quickly we were starting to get traction, but there's no question. It's December of 2007. That's when I knew our videos had traction. Okay. It was the...
Oh no, what'd you do?
Oh man, and it always goes down like that. It's never, you never know you get traction because someone stops you and goes, I just want to let you know, great job. It's always something bad. And so it was December of 07. I'll never forget it. Texas Stadium. Plano against Converse Judson in the state semifinals. So
Rex Burkhead
yes,
day.
this is a Rex Burkhead day. It was a sad day for him though, but so we had done our preview in our video, and I said that I thought Converse Judson was going to win. So I'm walking down the steps at Texas Stadium because we're going to get on the field and try to do another video from down there, and all of a sudden I just hear boo. And I'm like looking around, what is happening? Are they booing the warm-ups? And then I see somebody stand up, look right at me and go, boo. And I was like,
How far away was this person from you?
oh, like where that sign is, not far
So
enough.
literally right in your
At least they
face.
didn't bring signs against you or something.
Yeah, oh man, that would have been so terrible. And then people started to boo me like across the board, and then somebody goes, shouldn't you be on the other side of the field? And I was like, oh God, this is all in response to that video, which for the record, Converse Judson did win that game, I'm just saying. But it was at that point that I was like, holy crap, like we're kind of onto something here. I mean, I would prefer it if everyone watched the videos and we were beloved, but you know, what can you do? So it was at that point that I realized like we're really onto something, and it kind of kept building from there. Website traffic kept building, unique visitors kept building, and it was a really helpful creative outlet. Like I said, at a time when, I mean, there were some times where we had struggles with pages and all that, and I'm sure that's still a struggle that exists in the world, and it gave you another outlet to kind of get your word out there, much like y'all's podcast does right now. And so that was the start of it. We still have like our little artwork and everything
I
from
remember
back.
seeing that when you were
With the heads on the popsicle sticks.
Yes,
or-
absolutely.
Your belongings and stuff when you were leaving. I remember seeing those posters and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We still have those, and I mean, we still use the name for the show, and it's been great. And so Corey went on to do other things while I stayed here, and then he got a shot in radio, and we actually circulated those videos to the assistant programming director at 105.3 The Fan. He saw the videos and he was like, oh wow, I really enjoy these. And he goes, well, who do you want to work with? Do you want to work with, Chris Arnold, this guy? And Corey goes, what about the guy in the video? And our PD said, oh, can you get that guy? And he kind of was
get that guy?
very in demand. And he kind of chuckled and he goes, yeah, I think we can make that work. And so there you go. So we got our shot, and they said, we'll give you 3 shows on Sunday as a tryout. And then they called us into the office after the first show, which I thought, oh, that's not a good sign. Yeah, we're absolutely fired. And they said, no, you guys did a great job. You've got good chemistry, which we developed here. I mean, you know the conversations we have. I know we're in the midst of putting together the NBA top 20 outside of the newspaper.
You still got to finish yours, by the way.
Yeah, but we still.
Am I the straggler there?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But
There was a lot of debate going on. But,
we still communicate, and that's where that started from, and that chemistry started from, is just things we would kick around, the office, around the cubicles and stuff like that, and it really paid off. And this place was a huge launching pad. Like, we might have a friend or two, that one in particular that holds some hostility and whatnot, but I was like, dude, this place was great for me, and it helped launch where I am now. Like, I wouldn't have what I am now without Star Local Media, and that's a fact.
What do you remember about that very first weekend show that you and Corey did, and just kind of the whole radio experience?
real quick, how long have you guys been doing it now? Like 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, so 5 years, almost full time, and then remember we did part time for 2 years. And I actually had a question for you guys about that in a little bit. But what I remember about that first show is we were so ill prepared for that first segment, okay? Because on our clock then, segments were 11 minutes. And for our first segment, I kid you not, we wrote introduction. That was the segment. And in my mind, us talking about who we are and where we come from, easily gonna fill 11 minutes. Our show was from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. that day. We were done at 10:04. I looked at the clock. I have never had more time-related panic in my life than seeing that gaping 7 minutes sitting in front of us and thinking, uh-oh. So we thought on the fly. I just looked at him and he looked at me and we felt like we knew what we were going to do. We moved our second segment into that first segment, and I was like, we could figure out another segment in the break, because right now we got nothing and we got 7 minutes and we're about to be canceled in the first segment.
You're used to not enough time, not having to fill time.
Yes, I know. Like, it's such a
It's 1:30 a.m. already?
yeah, it's so crazy, because especially in high school football, you're like, stop passing the ball, just run it, let's run down the clock. Like, I got a deadline. But now I was like, oh, sweet Lord, like, I have 7 minutes, I have no idea what to talk about. So yeah, that is, I kid you not, the number one thing I take away from that is how much I panicked in the first segment. And like, you know, now you get to a point, I also had to turn off my phone, because if my phone buzzed, I would probably crumble mentally. Like, I couldn't handle any of that. And you get to the point where you can multitask.
Well, we did a podcast a couple months ago, and Chris Rourke, one of our coworkers, Chris Rourke has the most violent sneeze in humanity, and he let one fly during a podcast, and we had to edit the part out because I couldn't stomach it, and I tried to fight through it, and it took at least 2 or 3 takes to get back on track.
Please tell me at some point there'll be an outtakes version where I can watch that, because I would like to see that.
A lot of folks around the office have requested one, and there's certainly some material.
I'm sure Kevin took in a Rourke sneeze or two.
Oh, yeah. For sure. No, yeah, Chris Rourke was here when I was here.
Like, picture a 175-pound human being. It was the sneeze of like a 500-pound lumberjack.
Sure. You know, but like, to this day, and this is an urban legend in my family, she's passed away now, but my grandmother, nobody will back me up on this. I swear when she sneezed, she said, God bless you. And I swear she sneezed and goes, God bless you. I'm positive of that. Nobody in the family will back me up, and it'll never be proven. Sad.
One thing about making the transition to radio, where it's now like it's a full-fledged career for you now.
Sure.
I've always wondered how that alters the way that you go about taking in sports. I imagine being a sports fan pre-radio relative to actually, following it for a living now. I imagine you have to watch sports a little bit differently than usual. Is that correct?
Yeah, but not as much as you might think, because like, if you go back to when I was here and the conversations that we had, I mean, obviously, like, we talked NBA, NFL, all that, yeah. But like, we would talk random Olympic stuff. We would randomly talk about the World Cup. We would talk about March Madness. We would talk about even, when we had a kid from Plano that was Blake Coleman just got a contract extension, was going to get taken in the NHL draft. We would kick around like all kinds of variety of sports. And so that's been one of the cool things, is like, I like a lot of different sports. And so, I mean, the one holdup for me has always kind of been golf, and I have to just kind of suck it up. Sorry, Justin. I have to.
I like getting all the golf assignments.
You have to kind of suck it up here and there, but for the most part, like, we kind of made a decision a while back, and I think it really helped our show at some point late in the first year, is our programming director at the time, who's now running Fox Sports Radio on the West Coast, he said, there are some segments where I feel like you guys are either bored or doing it because you're supposed to. And he was right, because there were some times when, let's say the anthem debate right now is so many people will be doing segments about the anthem debate. Awesome. It's done. We already did it. I'm done with it. I'm ready for the next thing. And so we didn't feel obligated to talk about it yesterday at all, even though Jerry was talking about it, even though it's all over everything today. We're done with it. It's over. So we're going to talk about what we want to talk about. And so that was one of the things, is what's the biggest story of the day? We're going to tell you what the biggest story of the day is. And that was really a huge change for us. So that kind of speaks to your question about, does it alter the way I change sports, cover sports and watch sports? I mean, there are some things you can't ignore, but there are some things where I'm like, I don't care, and I'm going to care about something else, and hopefully you'll care about it too, and they have, luckily.
How has it changed things from, obviously you grew up liking the local teams?
Sure.
Do you feel like you don't, obviously you follow them maybe even more because of YouTube, but do you feel like from a rooting perspective, do you find yourself rooting less for the Cowboys or caring less about their result, or?
I think it's the opposite, actually. Yeah. I think it's more, but I care more about individual people than I still care about the team. If the Cowboys, both Green Bay games still hurt.
With and stuff.
Exactly. When people will bash Jalen Smith, Totally get why. Understand. He's the nicest freaking person in the world.
Yeah.
When so there are players like that, like Tyrone Crawford is really cool with us. So there are players like that I root a little bit more for them. Like, I want the Cowboys to win. That's still number one. But if the Cowboys could win and Jalen could pick up 13 tackles and a forced fumble, then that would really brighten up my day, because we had him on the show in training camp in Oxnard a couple summers ago, like right after he'd been drafted, and he was awesome. Like, he was super cool, and he even told the PR guy to give us a shout and was like, hey, love the interview, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I still care just as much, but then there's like little individual people that I'm like, all right, I care a little bit more. Like, I don't want Keone Kella to get traded because he's been super cool with us and he likes to swear. But yeah, he's been really cool with us. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, I care a little bit more about the individuals, whereas before, I don't know, I've never met any of these people. I don't care.
That's kind of something similar to here. Like, we're supposed to be unbiased and stuff, and a lot of teams we cover, we'll cover a game and we cover both teams, but also at the same time, you're talking to these players and getting to know them a little bit, and you can't help but kind of pull for them at times and stuff, even though you're not really supposed to.
You're dead on about that. So there was a girls' basketball. It was a playoff game. It's third round. Who's going to go to the regional tournament? I can't remember who Plano West was playing, but they lost, and they lost by a point or two. It was a really close game, and like Justin was just saying, you get to know these coaches, these players, and some you like better than the others. Maybe in our outtakes, I'll give you a whole list of coaches that I didn't care for. I got some. But they really thought that this was going to be their year to get back to the state tournament. They had won state, 5 or 6 years before, or whatever it had been, and this was going to be their time to get back. And it didn't happen, and it was, I know everyone was bummed, and you have to wait, like, outside the locker room, because it's not like, we're going to take you to the press room and blah, 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 bull crap. You guys work harder than anybody. You got to hustle down all your own interviews and all that stuff. And so I'm waiting outside the locker room, and Coach Patterson, his wife is out there, and you're in like the back of the school. It's late on a Tuesday night. There's nobody else around except the girls walking out of the locker room, and they're all crying. And you have to, like, do you get up in their face to get an interview? Because that's your job. And then he walks out of the locker room. His wife is there. He collapses into her arms. And he just starts to cry, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh my God, because that's my job. It's
like, such an uncomfortable situation.
It sucks, because I mean, here are your options: wait until their moment is over, do the best you can. Interrupt the moment, file a story with no quotes. None of those are desirable options.
I've done one of those before. I haven't done it since.
And it doesn't,
interrupting.
It doesn't feel good whichever route you go, and it sucks, because you're right, you're supposed to be unbiased, but there are absolutely times where, like, you feel yourself rooting, not just because you know the people, but it makes for the better story. Like, it's better for your paper if Plano Senior wins the state championship than it is if they lose in the area round. Like, it's better for your paper, it's better for your readers, it's better for your community, and it's probably better for you, because I would much rather talk with everyone after, oh my God, I'm crying because we won the state championship, than...
So I got so lucky last year with basketball, with Allen's boys basketball team.
And Plano girls,
Allen football. I mean, it was an embarrassment of riches last year, because like that sequence that you just described, like, that happens to just about unless you win state. Like, that's how your season's going to end if you make the playoffs.
No, absolutely. And then you have the thing that you always dread, is the dual market playoff game. Oh, that's the worst, because you go in there and you go, hey, good news, Justin. There's no way you're not going to interview someone who's crushed tonight. And like, you'll get the happy people, but no matter what happens, one of your teams is going to lose. Those are the worst.
How are you supposed to pick those ones, by the way? If Plano's booing you for picking Judson, have fun picking when you cover both teams.
Oh man, no kidding. Oh man, that's another. And I think this is one of the reasons that I bonded with the the Plano West girls basketball coach, and his wife, who everyone called Mama Pat, shout out Mama Pat, is we did Versus, which is a segment that we do on K&C now, and Corey and I would debate, and we were at the regional tournament, and Plano West was there, and I picked against Plano West. I sat down at the scorer's table before the game started. I had never met Coach Patterson's wife in my life. So I sit down at the scorer's table next to, I don't know, some lady. And so she looks right at me and she goes, "So you picked against us, huh?" And I was like, "I don't even know who you are." And she was like, "Well, I'm Coach Patterson's wife." And I was like, "Oh, sorry."
Did she become the actual coach?
No, his assistant coach.
Yeah, Kristen Perry.
Yeah.
Perry, that's okay, yeah.
They didn't like it down the road is because I think I said once, because their coach was like, "Oh, so you picked against us." And I was like, "I'm just saying, Coach, I've picked against you like 3 times the whole time I've been here." And then I stopped and I was like, "And I don't think I need to remind you what happened in those games." And he was like, "No, you don't." They lost all 3 of them.
That's kind of sticking with just interviews and shifting back to radio. I've always been curious, like in all the years you guys have been doing this, is there one interview that kind of sticks out that is just like the most memorable that you guys have done?
Can I cheat and give you 2?
Absolutely.
So one of them is Jerry Jones, because he swore at us. It was like a really minor swear, but he said we're talking, and we're really pushing him about something about Garrett, because the Cowboys were struggling and all this support for Garrett, and I was just like hammering him about this thing, and he goes, "Look, this is not a damn debate. You asked for my opinion. I gave it to you, okay?" I was like, "Oh, I should probably relax here," and it got kind of heated super quick. But it all diffused really quickly. But then that went freaking everywhere, and so people had "This is not a damn debate." Somebody made me a T-shirt of it and all that, and like the little clip was everywhere, and I was like kind of proud and sad all at the same time. But then the other one was Deion Sanders, and Deion Sanders might be number 1, is because you guys know, like, we dealt a lot with like Prime Prep and all their shenanigans when they would run up against some of our teams, or supposed to and not. And Prime Prep was a joke. It was a fraud, and I knew that from covering high school sports with you guys. And so we were filling in for the morning show the day that like Prime Prep was losing its academic accreditation, and I was just going on and on about it because we had been through it and I was pretty familiar with it. And the producer Troy for the regular morning show, Sean and RJ, he said, "Well, I bet if Deion was here you wouldn't say that." And I was like, "The hell I wouldn't." Get on the horn. Everybody Troy, you get on the horn. You get Deion Sanders on this show. I guarantee you I'll say the same thing. 15 minutes later, he goes, "All right, Deion's confirmed for 9:30. And I was like, "Bring it on." You know how I am. Like, I'm not averse to confrontation. Wasn't then, not now. And so we brought him on, and it started like friendly enough, but then it started to frustrate me because he was giving all these nonsense answers, and he was like, "People don't understand. Our school has given homes to these athletes who would have nowhere to go otherwise." And I'm like, "Your starting 5 is all in the top 50 recruits nationally. Every single one of these kids could go to any high school and any college they wanted. I don't know what you're talking about." Then he started like doing some rhyming and stuff, and it was just driving me insane.
Doing the prime routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it led to a very famous clip that still gets played on our air. It started to amp up a little bit, and he goes, "Oh, well, I see your tone has changed." And so now I think it's hilarious. In the moment, I was furious. But yeah, so we went back and forth, and it created a lot of buzz, which, again, like, I wish that all buzz would be created because, you just did the greatest segment ever and it's going to help mankind. But that's not realistic. So it was good because we got a major athlete, and I was kind of happy because I didn't back down. Like, I could have been like, "Oh, hey, Prime, what's up? Congrats on the Hall of Fame." But no, I was like, this is BS and let's go do it. So that was another one that really stands out.
Let's look at kind of what Kevin's been up to nowadays. Well, let's keep you around a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about what what you used to do, and I promise that sounds less scandalous than it actually does.
Oh,
so
man.
We will talk a little bit more of Kevin's...
Not the juvenile shoplifting. I gotcha. Good.
Kevin's work on the high school beat, and we will get to that in a few moments after a word from this sponsor. Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now. Everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back, myself, Justin Thomas, joined by former Star Local Media Sports Editor Kevin Hageland, now one half of the K&C Masterpiece, Monday through Friday, 7 through 11 p.m. on 105.3 The Fan. We've been talking about your transition to radio and whatnot, but obviously you had a career here, spanned 7 years beforehand. So let's kind of dig back into that. Kevin was the sports editor for the Plano Star-Courier and the Allen American during his time with this company. And when you started back in 06. What do you kind of remember about just kind of getting your feet wet with the Plano Allen beat once upon a time?
I made a mistake on my first day. I remember I graduated from college on a Saturday, and I started here on a Monday. Like, I'd lined this job up ahead of time, and the guy who hired me, Dave Sorter, who was the managing editor in Plano at the time, he said, "So you'll be covering the high school beat?" And I asked, and now it's a preposterous question. At the time, like, we all live our lives and do our thing, it's like, this is a full-time position just to cover high school sports? Is there enough to cover?
I get that all the time.
Yeah, and he just kind of laughed.
You knew.
Oh yeah, oh my God, you have no freaking idea how intense these people are too. But yeah, he just kind of laughed and he goes, "Oh yeah, we'll fill your time up." And it took 2 seconds to learn how quickly that was the case. The first thing I covered was the Plano East spring game, and really quickly you realize, especially with all the markets that you guys cover and all the high schools that are in each market and all the sports that go with each high school and all the athletes that go with each sport, and oh my God, there's so much to cover. Like, you could work 80 hours, and sometimes, like signing day, you get close. But the first day that I was here, before I even went to the Plano East spring game, the sports editor at the time, Brian Porter, he was a Plano senior guy all the way.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
He was my editor when I started.
He's Plano senior, leader of the Rex Burkhead fan club all the way.
The first game that you had me go out to was Plano versus MacArthur, the 2009 season opener, and Brian was in the press box, obviously, and he was the one who kind of showed me the ropes of how to conduct yourself in a high school football press box.
And he loved Plano senior, and because of that, Plano senior hates Allen, or hated, and probably still. And so, I got the Allen beat, not because I chose it, because I thought they'll probably be a state powerhouse any day now. I got the Allen beat because Porter didn't like Allen because he liked Plano Senior. That is absolutely a fact. And so when people are like, "Oh, did you pick the Allen beat?" I was like, "No, I got it out of spite." And so I called Coach Westerberg, who we've all dealt with Coach Westerberg. I think he's a very nice human being. He is not always the most welcoming to the press, especially in the beginning. And so I didn't have a cell phone or anything, so I called the athletic office. And instead of saying, first day, mind you, instead of saying I work for the Allen American, I said I work for the Austin American because I'm bad at my job. And I won't forget this either, because I was like, oh, well, it's all got to be uphill from here. I got Westerberg on the phone, and he goes, "Why does somebody from Austin want to know about our football team?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the Allen American." "Whew, first day. Can you tell?" And he goes, "Kinda." I
love that about Westerberg.
I was just like, because he's a quick-witted guy.
Absolutely.
But I just thought, oh, I am already so bad at this job. And then the other thing, this was, I don't know if it was first day, it was maybe second or third day. Like I said, a lot to cover. So, first couple of days, I call Westerberg. That night I'm at the East spring game. The next day or the day after that I'm out at the West spring practices. And so I talk with Coach Hughes out at Plano West, and I tell him like, hey, I'm going to be on the Plano West beat because again, I took the beats that Porter did not want, and East was their second, so that was his second favorite. West was the newest, so boo to them. And so that's why I covered West and Allen, is because he didn't want them, and so they went to me. And so I was talking to Coach Hughes, and it was really intense, and he was like, so are you the new guy on the beat? And I was like, yes sir, Coach. And he goes, well, I just have one request then. I was like, sure, don't ever lie to me. I was like, what? And he goes, the last fella, somebody who like was gone before I even got there, he goes, yeah, he lied to me, and I won't tolerate that, and I don't expect that from you. And I was like, I desperately want to know like more about this old situation, but I don't feel like now's the time to ask.
To the point where that's the first ground rule that he has.
Oh yeah. I was like, okay, got it, Coach. I won't. And so we had a great relationship after that, but just not the most auspicious start for either one of those beats. Eventually we got it down, but yeah, it was kind of a rough start.
I had opposite. I remember I did some football games, but I remember the one of the first basketball games I covered was actually a playoff game. It was Louisville, and I had maybe covered them like one time, and I got to the gym. It was at Colleyville Heritage, I believe, and it was packed. I was a little late kind of getting there and finding a spot, and there was nothing at the scorer's table and stuff. And one of my favorite coaches to ever cover, Henry
Coach Thomas, he's the best. He's not from Flower Mound.
And so I'm just walking around, and I hear Coach Thomas like, Justin, and I'm looking. He's like, I was like, what's up, Coach? He's like, can't find a seat, can you? I was like, no. He's like, come on down here. And so I just plopped myself right down on the Louisville bench right next to
Awesome.
Wouldn't consider doing it again, never did it, but it was one of the first games I covered, and I didn't know any better, so I was like, sure, I'll sit right next to you and do my stats and stuff. So
yeah, Coach Thomas was awesome. He was one of those, like when we did crossover markets, you would kind of hope that you would run into that team.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm sure reporters have the same thing, but coaches, you got a reputation too, and it would be discussed around the press room. And so he'd be like, hey, you got this tonight. Oh, that coach.
Yeah.
Hey, good luck with that.
Yeah.
But then there was times like Coach Thomas, you're like, all right.
How different was just working in community sports journalism back in the day? Because I mean, just looking at things like this and with the videos that we do, I mean, the industry itself has evolved so much in recent years.
Yeah.
Thinking back to the mid 2000s, like just how different was the job when you were first getting started?
Yeah, it was. Well, first of all, the biggest difference is the Star Courier came out 6 days a week.
That's right.
When we started, and so that's the number one change. And so you were like every day, and now the everyday change has gone to, you know, website and podcast, whereas every day before meant print. And so I think that's probably the biggest change. Now, like the theory behind it and the stories and the beat and everything, that's not different, but that's the biggest thing. I remember when we switched down to, you know, 5 days a week, it was a scandal, and when we switched down to 2 days a week, it was just, I can't believe it. People are fainting in the streets and all that, you know, like it was just, it was a big thing. But then the other change as we went along is, you know, like you guys are doing the podcast right now, the video blog and everything like that, and that's like, people come to expect that from a media company. People come to expect that from you. But when we started the video blog, that was like a thing.
It was new, yeah. There was no other real outlet to find that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And so that was one of the big things, is something that was huge, and like we had no idea what the hell you guys were doing. Like, you all have your setup. It took 2 seconds to get this going because you guys know what you're doing and you're ready to go. When we started it, there was a lot of trial and error. We had to figure out, you know, will the bandwidth support this and that? And like there was a lot of technical complications that went into it. But yeah, those are the two probably the biggest things, is everything was print, as opposed to, you know, online, edit, breaking, everything. And the video aspect, ours was always, the print is first and online is second, which, you know, you can argue that's a flawed logic that's flawed logic that newspapers had, like even back in the middle of the 2000s. But that's one of the reasons we started the video blog too, is because we wanted to say, hey, let's get more of a web presence out there. So I think the print versus online thing is probably the biggest difference.
I would say the technology is definitely the biggest difference.
It's
When was
wild.
the last time, have you been to a high school game since you've left, or in a high school press box or anything?
We went to
you
the
tagged along with
Allen
them, yeah, an
State
Allen State title game,
Championship, but not a whole lot. What's the scene up there now?
One of the things I always get a kick out of, and like some of the younger guys like Brian, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but I remember when I first started working here, there was no Twitter and stuff. You couldn't, you
Yeah.
don't go on Twitter and type in Plano East and look and you see their score right away. I can't believe they used to actually have handheld phones.
To make the calls about the
press
scores?
box, and you'd just be sitting there and the phone would ring and they'd say, Goldsmith Stadium, and they'd say, our score is 21-7. We have 4 minutes left in the third quarter. What's your score over there in Mesquite?
Oh,
There is a
man.
giant whiteboard behind
With all the
everybody
scores?
writes all the scores. So if you needed to know a score of another game that, two teams are competing for a playoff spot or something, and you look and there's the score, and the phones are always ringing, and there's a big phone book with every stadium phone number and stuff. And now that I don't even think they have phones in there anymore.
Okay.
And stuff. Except for in Marcus, old Bill Sherman and Marcus.
Okay,
keeps the whiteboard going.
Good, because legit, I was going to say, it makes me sad to think that or the gal out in Allen is not doing her thing anymore.
Yeah.
And that phone would ring a lot, and you would just be desensitized to it unless it was a score you needed to hear.
Yeah.
And then
Sometimes you would have to ask them, hey, can you call Mesquite?
yeah, and
Need the
find
morning
out.
score.
Yeah. And then the other thing that they did that I don't know if this is still a thing, they would announce the score to the
yeah.
crowd. Like you'd be at the Allen
still do
game.
that. They still do
Okay,
that.
good.
Yeah.
Because that was my favorite thing. They would announce it and they would be like, update, Capel 30, Plano 27. And if it was like an Allen crowd, they would be like, and so it was just always so great. Like, it didn't matter what was happening in your team's game. If you got an update that your rival was losing, man, I did love that. I remember, I will give props to Corey for this, and, now I'm much more heavy on Twitter at Thank Kevin.
That took a while.
Yeah,
I
it
remember.
did, because I was like I'm stubborn, I'm resistant to change.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, that's why I work so well here. And so, like, I remember when Corey said, hey, we're going to get you on this thing called Twitter. And I was like, what the hell is Twitter? But it wasn't just because I was out of the loop.
Yeah,
Like, nobody knew what
it was
Twitter
just
was.
getting going.
I had to literally talk to somebody in Japan who set up my account for me, because it was like, if you look at the origination of my account, I bet my account's like pretty close, like within the first year.
Let's see. I'm going to look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, because it goes back a long time, and I remember I had to talk to someone who said they were a technical support guy in Japan to set up a Twitter account, and I didn't understand what was happening, and I was for sure the only person in the press box who was using this fancy Twitter.
You joined September 2008.
Wow.
So
You beat me by 4 years.
yeah, so like
I even worked here.
yeah, like I said, it was like way back, and I didn't really.
Update your profile photo, by the way.
Yeah, look, I need to do the same thing for Facebook too. People are like, that's not what you look like. But yeah, so it was wild, and so you're right. That's a game changer, because your primary thing when you were at the game is you had to get the stats. But now it's like you have to tweet out some updated stats. You have to tweet out the scores. You have to tweet out primary plays. I've seen both of you guys tweet out videos and stuff
we're
like that.
shooting videos from the press box.
Yeah.
now, too.
Yeah, when I started, I couldn't even take video on my phone.
Oh yeah,
That was like a requirement.
Yeah, that's.
You still can't on mine. I got to use an actual camera to do it.
and before it was just you got to take the stats by hand,
Yeah, basically you show up at the game and I would have 8 pieces of paper, running logs, play-by-play, and that's all I would take to a game and all I would need. I didn't have a computer or anything.
Absolutely. And now, like, your goal might be to file the bulk of a story at halftime, or definitely
Still
to
do
try.
that, at least what I can.
Exactly.
at halftime, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's always that game that devastates what you've got.
28-3 halftime.
And then-
story written.
Yeah.
So much.
And then it's 31-28.
Yeah.
You realize that everything you wrote is completely irrelevant. Yeah, no, we've all been through that.
With you mentioned the needing to update your profile picture on Twitter. I do remember when you first reprised that working here. Wasn't it like some obscure Family Guy reference that you pulled for your?
Oh, it's got to be. Like,
picture?
I mean, you guys know me. There is no situation in life that I don't think you can relate to something that happened on The Simpsons, Family Guy, or South Park. Still,
Seinfeld, of course.
Or yes, of course, of
I'm
course.
pretty sure now that I'm thinking, I think it was actually Gary the No Trash Cougar.
Yes. And kids, if you're not familiar with that, go look it up because it's amazing.
I did want to, before we, let you go, I did want to do kind of I don't want to call this even a speed round, but just chronicling some of the highlights as far as teams, players, and whatnot that you covered. What was, in your time working here, what was the best team that you covered? Just pound for pound, the best team that you saw. Between Allen and Plano, of course.
That had to be the 08 Plano West baseball team.
Okay.
Because that was the team that was undefeated for most of the year. And they eventually lost, I think, 2 playoff games, but they finished 40-2, and they were named the Max Prep National Champions. They also won the baseball state title, and they had, I want to say, 8 or 9 kids that played D1 college baseball, including, I guess Billy McKinney, who was drafted in the first round of the draft. He wouldn't come around for another couple of years, so that's when they got back to state. But that 08 team, man, they just had kid after kid after kid. It was like, they were going to TCU, they were going here, they were going there. That team was unbelievable, and they had all the swagger, and they were rolling, and that was an awesome year for me. Like you'd mentioned this year for you, that was an awesome year for me because that team won the state baseball championship, and then in the fall, Allen won the state football championship, and that
would have been their first one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And that was the thing. Like, I remember when they made it to the state semifinal, that's where they were going to lose because that's where they always lost, was in the state semifinal, including 2 years earlier. It was the single most disastrous play I've ever seen in the history of covering high school sports. It was state semifinal. It was Allen against South Lake Carroll. And South Lake Carroll, the Dragons were always the one who took Allen down.
Stake was high.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was. It really was. And especially when it came to Allen. And I remember Westerberg, again, smart guy, deadpans, and I asked him about a South Lake curse, and he was like, well, if we're cursed, then so is every other team in this state because they beat them all. And I was like, that's a fair counterpoint. But, they had lost to South Lake in this very spot time and again. But in 06, it was different. This was the year. And they had, Nathan Dick, who would go on to be the quarterback at Arkansas. And they had the ball to start the game in Allen. They're driving. They look good. And you're thinking, maybe? I mean, I know it's just the first possession, but they look like they're doing something. So they get inside about the 20-yard line. And then there's a play where, I can't remember if the play busted or if it was a designed run. Nathan Dick takes off. He gets popped by the sidelines. Not only does he fumble, he's injured and out for the rest of the game. Carroll recovers and takes it back for a touchdown. All in one play. Allen lost 38-0. Because without Nathan, they had nothing. South Lake Carroll had just punched them in the face to start the game, and it was over. And so in that semifinal in 08, they scored a touchdown. I remember, I think they were playing Round Rock Stony Point or something like that. And they scored a touchdown in the last minute of the game to win. Otherwise, it was going to be another state semifinal where they lost. And so they made it to the finals, and I picked them in the finals, and I had been shouting out the greatness of Plano all year. Of Allen all year. I remember when Allen ran into Plano was undefeated, Allen was undefeated in 08. I was like, Allen is going to smash Plano. And people were like, Plano, I got it. Allen destroyed Plano, and I was like, I told you, this team's awesome. And I remember when they played Euless Trinity in non-district, I was telling everyone that would listen they would beat Euless Trinity. And they didn't. And so I was like, oh, Allen, I thought you betrayed me. And so, because you get oddly invested, like you said, in some of these things. And I was really convinced that Allen had what it took. And so they rematched with Trinity in the playoffs. And so I picked Trinity on the picket line. For the record, Allen played 16 games that year. That was the only time I picked against them. The first time they played Trinity, I picked Allen. In the rematch, I picked Trinity. Of course, this time, Allen wins. And they win pretty convincingly. So I got a bunch of flack about picking against them, as you do. But they beat Fort Bend Hightower, I want to say, in the state championship. And we were at Reliant in Houston. And all the assistant coaches, for people that aren't familiar, most of the assistants will sit up in the press box, like usually, or a lot of times in a room like right next to you. And so as soon as the clock's ticking down under a couple minutes, I see all of their assistant coaches, and they've got the game, they're going to win. And the coaches make a break for it, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to get down there with the coaches. And so I'm in like slightly better shape now than I was at the time. So I was like, it was taking every bit of effort I had in my body to like run down the hallway with them. And so I just make it inside the elevator, and it's just me and all the Allen assistant coaches, and it was so fun because they're all going nuts. They're high-fiving me, not objective, and we're just having a really good time. And then one of the assistants goes, oh hey, I'm glad you actually picked us for once. I was like, come on man, it's 16 games, I picked against you one time. And so then you get down in the tunnel, and they dead sprint out to the field, and I did my version of a dead sprint out to the field, and it was great because I got to run onto the field with all the coaches, and there was a good 45,000 people there, and the vast majority of the Allen travels really well. Yeah. The vast majority of them are Allen fans, and everyone's going nuts, and I was like, dude, this is legit awesome. Like when Plano West won the baseball state title, or the year before, the girls had won the soccer state title, like there's a good number of people there, but it ain't the same. And so when you're in the stadium with 45,000 people, and I know they weren't cheering for me, but I was there, and it's like the reflective glow, and the team that because, and I'm sure you guys feel this way, when you get to that point, I know more about that team than anybody who's not on the team, right? Like, don't you guys feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, even the fans, like, I feel like I know more about this team than anybody else, and it feels like, kind of a win for you too. And then I remember I moved out of the way when I was interviewing Westerberg because I saw them do the Gatorade. Yeah. And so I kind of did the thing where I saw people approaching, and I kind of looked to the left again, and I was like, oh, this is happening. And so I just take my step back right when it happens, and then I step back in and keep and I keep asking questions. And that was one of my favorite post games. The other one was, and this was an out of market thing because eventually we kind of consolidated all our departments, and we fell under one umbrella. So I covered when Salina won a state softball championship, and it was Coach Coleman. I feel pretty confident about that. I just hijacked everybody else's interviews because, we had Plano teams in the state softball tournament, and I'd been there the year before, and I saw Salina lose. And so they had mostly the same crew the next year, and I was back there, and I saw them win. And so I knew, the basic elements of the story. And so, a bunch of people, especially at state, they crowd right around, and I was like, no, not today. I got the questions that I want to ask. And so Fox Sports Southwest set their camera up. There were people from here, there were people from there. I made a determination that nobody else was going to ask a question until I was done with my questions, and I hijacked the first 8 minutes of the interview. It was just because I had all my questions ready, and I was going to leave no dead time for anyone else to jump in. And so I go, and then it was done. I was like, awesome, Coach, congratulations, I know this feels good. And he's like, yeah, it does. And then I walked off, and everybody else from the media was still standing there, and they're like, so tell us about the third inning. And I was like, don't care. I got in every question I wanted, and I was like, see you later.
Speaking of interviews, whether it was a player or a coach, who was your favorite interview subject while you were working here?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
Isn't it cool how you kind of, throughout the time, you kind of get to know the coaches, and what questions to ask them, or
for sure.
Some questions, some coaches you don't even have to ask. You just say, "So, what'd you think?" and they'll just sit there and talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And other ones, you have to ask question after question, and they're just yes or no, and you got to try to over time you kind of figure out how you need to ask these questions and
Every
stuff.
subject's different as far as the kind of stuff that makes them tick.
I will tell you this though, Westerberg is amazing prep for Coach Garrett. Like, they're the same. If you ever hear them talk, they're so the same. Like, somebody asked me, oh, are you nervous to interview Coach Garrett? He doesn't give all the best answers. I was like, I've been interviewing Coach Garrett for 8 years. I know exactly what to do. Because, like, you could roll into Westerberg's office and have 20 questions, and that's a 4-minute interview. Whereas Jade McCullough, with Plano, you could have 4 questions, and that thing's taken 30 minutes. I remember how happy I was for him when he got the opportunity to take over for Coach Brent, because McCullough was he was the most diehard Plano fan that I know, and I remember he was telling me about, like, when they opened Clark Stadium, me and my brother were there. Obviously, he's been a big part of this. The stories around here too. Me and my brother were there for season tickets. Like, he is dyed in the wool Plano all the way. The other one that immediately jumps to mind because of the way he talked was was Coach Clark, the Plano West baseball coach. Then he went on to Coppell.
I love Coach Clark.
He's the best.
He's one of the ones I was mentioning. You just kind of say what's going on, and there he goes.
Oh, because Coach Clark will tell you exactly what's on his mind, and then a lot of times he'll give you his homespun country wisdom to go with it, and that's what am I love. And it's just so funny. Like, some of these questions, you don't realize how much these memories are, like, absolutely a part of you. But again, like, I don't know why I thought that. I worked here for a long time. Like, I worked here longer than I've been at the radio. And so it all just comes rushing back to you so quickly. I was talking to him about the start of district. Like, we just finished up non-district, and he goes, oh, this first game is huge. And I was like, okay, well, why is that? And he was like, think about it. And he just, he kind of, and you can tell it's going to be this amazing answer. And I was like, Oh yeah, that's another thing when you're talking about the differences. I always brought a notepad with me to write everything down. He goes, so imagine you're walking in to this big field of grass, and that's district play, is the big grass, and all of a sudden a snake just pops out, and it really, like, legit scared me because I wasn't prepared for that. And he did the dramatic hand motion and everything, and he was like, and that's what you want to do in your first district game, be the snake. And I just thought, that's the greatest quote I've ever heard. And so
it was pretty good.
Yeah, no, I liked Coach Clark very, very much. He was awesome. There were a lot of really good ones. I told you about some of my weird history with the Plano West girls basketball team, but Coach Patterson and Mama Pat, like when you get to like the holiday tournaments and stuff, sometimes I would bring my son to some of those, and they were always really nice to him too. And you almost feel like you're part of that team's family in certain instances. You really do. And so I feel bad now because I know there are so many others that I'm going to be leaving out. And it's odd sometimes when you see those coaches out in the world otherwise. Like I saw the Coach O'Neill, who is the Prestonwood volleyball coach. Her son was in the same basketball league as my son. And I saw her and she's like, what's going on? And so this is after I left, and it's just really weird to see them afterwards. And then, I got to take it back to Westerberg. We had our ups and downs. One of my most crushing failures as an interviewer is I remember the year that all the games were going to be played on Halloween night, and I had asked Coach Hughes about Plano West about that. I was like, oh, what do you think? And he goes, oh yeah, better watch out for those ghosts and goblins. And like, so he played along with me, and I asked Coach Westerberg about it. It was so funny. I asked Coach Westerberg, he didn't even blink, and he goes, no. What's the difference? We play on Halloween every 5 to 6 years, depending on how the calendar falls. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, okie dokie then, next question. And so
will this happen to be a similar Halloween to where an unnamed co-worker might have conducted a football interview in a scantily clad...
Can we tell that story? If I'm going to leave the name,
leave the name out,
and
please,
the coaches involved out. All right, so absolutely, yes, to answer your question. So we had a reporter, and I mean, I'm sure by now your viewers know this, your listeners know this, and everything like that is, man, it takes a freaking army of people to get it done on Friday night. And so you enact a lot of people, and so we had a news writer, and she was doing football, and I remember I was going to be off that Halloween night because, you know, my son was, at that point, he was only like 5, and I didn't want to, he might have only been 4. I didn't want to miss that, and so I felt really bad bailing on high school football, but I'm a planner. I felt like I had a pretty decent plan in place, and so I talked to this person earlier in the day. She called me because we do a costume contest up here at the office, and she, I'll try to clean up my language a little bit too. So she was like, hey, I'm here for the costume contest, and I just wanted to know, can I wear this costume to cover the game tonight? And I was like, oh, I really would prefer that you didn't. And so she was like, come on, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what are you dressed as? And she said, a cop. I'll clean up my language here. And I said, are you a cop or are you a...
She was a Halloween cop.
A Halloween cop. That's the best way. That's better than what I was going to say. And she goes, probably a Halloween cop. And I was like, I really think it's a bad idea. And she said, please, please, please. And I said, look, I think this is ill-advised and a bad idea. But then again, I took the day off, so, you know, I'm not going to be there. And so clearly I did a poor job there, and I kind of let her off the hook. Well, she texted me in the first quarter, and she goes, yeah, this was such a mistake. And she said she felt so out of place and embarrassed. And it was good to know that. But really when I found out was the next Monday, Tuesday, whatever it was. And, you know, we'll make the rounds, go talk to the coaches, go see them at the schools and everything like that whenever you have time. And so I went up to this particular school who was involved in the game, and one of the assistant coaches goes, oh, hey, Kevin, I'm kind of bummed to see you. Where's Officer so-and-so? Yeah. And I was like, oh, no. And, like, that was the whole talk of the office. And then the coach came in, and he goes, hey, Kevin, I got to thank you for that reporter that you sent out to the game on Friday. I was like, oh, my Lord. And so, yeah, I found out pretty quickly it was the talk of the game, and that was something. But so Westerberg shut down my Halloween question, but it was a great moment for me, and it was a great kind of sense of closure. You know, I finished up here in October of 2013, and I remember the last live football game I covered, the most irrelevant football game ever. It was Allen against Richardson. The only thing that mattered about that game is the elevator stopped when I was on it on the way up with a bunch of other coaches, and this one poor trainer girl who I was like, I feel bad for you for being stuck in here. But yeah, the final score was like, 1,000-6 or whatever. And I just remember walking on the field and it being so weird because I'm like, man, this is the last live game I'm gonna cover. And so I was gone the next month. And I don't think it was that December. I think it was actually the next state title. Mm-hmm. So it was 14, the last of the Kyler run. And I tagged along to go to the state championship. Allen was going to play. It was the last game for Kyler. You know, I still knew a lot of the guys on the team. Like, it's weird now because, I'll read y'all's stuff, and I follow you guys on Twitter, obviously. But I don't recognize any of the names anymore because it's been 5 years. But for several years out, I was like, oh, I know that person. Because, a lot of these kids play now, they're freshman, sophomore. And so I went out there and I walked down with you onto the field and I got to catch up with some people. And then I saw Coach Westerberg. I didn't even come up to him. Like, he looked at me and he goes, Kevin Hageland. And he walked right up to me. I was like, oh, wow. And so he, gave me a really nice greeting, and we chatted, and we just had like a normal conversation while they're in the midst of celebrating another state championship. And he was like, and I want to let you know I get the opportunity to listen to your program quite a bit. And I was like, do you now? Because he'd always struck me as someone who didn't care for hijinks and shenanigans, and he's
got a sense of humor to him.
He does.
He'd necessarily let on in front of the media.
Sure, which is probably wise. And he goes, yeah, a lot of times y'all are on when we're leaving the facility for the day, and he goes, I just want to let you know, I think you're doing a really good job. And I was like, oh wow, thanks, Coach. And it was weird because I had walked off the field in that Allen and Richardson game, and that was kind of part of the end for me. But then when I walked off the field that day, it really felt like another kind of sense of closure, because somebody who I always I was like, you don't have to like me, but you're going to respect me, is I kind of got that sense of validation right there. And it was a pretty cool little moment. It really was.
Seems like a good, a nice way to wrap this up. Kind of having come full circle with.
No, absolutely. Can I ask a question of you guys then?
Go for it.
So, I was curious before I left. Did y'all know that I was imminently going to be out the door? Because, I left in October. I told you guys that I was leaving in September, but I feel like I had maybe been gone more and more. Did y'all get the feeling that I
felt like something was kind of in the works?
Yeah.
And I feel like it was just kind of a matter of time. So when you did, because I still remember how it all happened when you pulled us all into the room up front, which is now now Deb's office. Yeah. And when you told us all, I mean, like you said, I kind of anticipated it, but to still hear it was kind of a shock, just because, like I said, you hired me. You brought me on as an intern in 2009, and just thinking wow, this is really just kind of a turning of the page, so to speak. And on the one hand, obviously elated, that you're getting the opportunity that you guys did.
Sure.
Glad to see. But at the same time, we're just wondering, wow. I mean, things are gonna change, and who knew what that meant for for any of us at the time. But yeah, I mean, I think I kind of had a semblance that something was in the works, because I mean, you guys were doing great work, and I remember a lot of the feedback that you would give me on how the show was going was, it kind of intimated that you might be getting close.
Yeah.
I think another thing is that just kind of over the years, you kind of see that something about this place. People leave and end up coming back pretty regularly. There's a lot of people I've worked with that have quit or found other positions, and so you never really know if it's for sure, especially doing sports, when it's something where you could, even if you're not working here, you could still come back and do stuff about. So you never really know when somebody's going to be gone or not.
Yeah. No, it was a weird day too, because I remember we called that impromptu staff meeting, because everything that was happening was really secretive, because we were coming up, other people were going away at the fan, and so I wasn't supposed to say anything, and it was really tense. And I remember Andrew Snyder called me over, and he goes, hey, I just read something about you on the internet. Is it true? That's never what you want to hear. I don't care what the scenario is.
No context at all.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. And I walked over, and it had just broken on the Dallas Morning News that we were taking over the spot. And I was kind of like, oh crap. I already knew what happened. I had already signed a contract at that point. And so I was like, all right, we got to have a staff meeting right now. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody goes, hey, can you give me 5 minutes? And I said, sorry, nope, it has to be now. Because the last thing I wanted is for everyone to read about it online or whatever. I wanted to be the one to tell you guys, but I was kind of in a tough spot, because they were like, well, don't leak the news to anybody. Don't even tell your parents, and blah, 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 blah. And so it was a really weird thing. And I was kind of bummed. And I remember, our old editor, Rick, I gave him my 2 weeks notice, which actually turned out to be a 4 weeks notice, so we could get everything down. I just kind of gave him the letter, and he goes, is this what I think it is? And I was like, just read it. And so, yeah, I got the sense that maybe y'all knew that I was probably going to be out the door, because we've been doing so much more fill-in and stuff like that. And plus, I loved working here. I honest to goodness loved working here. There are times when I'm sure you guys share the same frustrations that I did and everything like that, but the people you meet are awesome. The flexibility is awesome. I always tell people, they're like, what's your favorite part about journalism? And I said, I love the stories, and I especially love the stories that nobody else gets to know. Now kind of what we're doing, you lose some of that. Sometimes with Jalen, and you feel like you get some of those stories back, but people generally know what's going on with the Cowboys and all that. But do you really know what's happening like inside the Allen boys basketball team or whatever, and like you guys get to bring that to the world. I got to bring that to the world for the longest time, and I still to this day in my house, we did a softball feature in Plano about all these girls that were on the same 10U softball team that won the city championship. And then they all went on to go to different schools, but they all stayed in this general vicinity. And so one day, and this is like 7 years later, it was on a Sunday, we went back to one of the Plano ISD softball fields. We got all of those girls back together, and now they were at Plano East, Plano West, and Ursuline. And it was they hadn't all, like, they had all seen each other, but they hadn't all been back together in that same group in a whole bunch of years. And I brought my son out there with me, and I have a picture in my house framed up among some other things of Brandon sitting with that group of girls, and it's one of my favorite stories. It's one of my favorite designs ever. I can still tell you the title of it because it was a full page spread. It was called Now and Then, and it had the girls from the 10U team, and it had all of the same girls in the same poses and everything when they were all like seniors in high school. And I thought, like, not that some people didn't know that story, but I was like, that's a story. Like, most people don't know that story, and hopefully when everyone picked up their Sunday copy of the Star Courier, they saw this story and they were like, that's a really cool story. And that's something that you lose a little bit at this level, but being here, I love that.
So then it'll be, I guess, the 5-year anniversary in October? Yes. Unfortunately, Justin, probably not going to be back here imminently, as they just picked up our contract option again. So yeah, we'll still be a little while. I'm sure eventually I'll come back through the door. But for now, he'll be without me for a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean, obviously, man, best of luck to you going forward, and keep up the great work on the radio. And
thank you so much.
That'll do it for this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. Kevin, appreciate you for tagging along. Justin, you as well. We'll be back on Monday with another episode, the start of a very football-intensive build to the upcoming season next month. So in the meantime, folks, this has been Matt Welch with Star Local Media. Hey, y'all enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk to y'all later.